Well, here it is, folks. The first Super Tournament of the year, 2015, the 77th Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Great action, great tournament, great world-class players. Don't miss any of the action. And here are the standings after 11 rounds in the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess, the Masters section. Magnus Carlsen from Norway, current world champion with 8. Wesley So, originally from the Philippines, now playing from the U.S., just a half a point behind. Maxime Vacher-Lagrave, Giri and Ding with 7. Ivanchuk, I like him a lot. Chess genius, interesting character. He has 6.5, as well as Caruana. Rajabov with 5.5. Wosecek, I believe it's pronounced, with 5. Aronian with 5. Huey Fan, women's world champion with 4. Van Wheelie with 3.5. Saric with 3. And Joe Bava, poor Joe Bava, 1.5. I gotta say again, I'm not picking on 11 Aronian, but I'll tell you, it's tough. He's one of the best players in the world. I don't know what's happened the last year or so. He had an okay year last year, but ever since he didn't do that well in the candidates final, was the first when Magnus won on tiebreaks against Kramnik to beat Anand the first time. Something seems to come out of him. He's still a good guy. He's still a nice guy, but something happened. Hopefully he can recover. Anyway, folks, that's the standings after 11 rounds. 2 rounds to go. Hi, folks. John Cordisco back again. It's going to be the last round, the last video from the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess. Not my last video on my channel, but the last video from this tournament. The result of this game decides the winner. White, Magnus Carlsen, current world champion, needs no introduction in the chess world. And Ivan Saric, I believe Ivan's from Croatia, is black. Let's get to it. Carlsen is white, Saric is black. It's going to be a Sicilian. Go through the first few moves here. Knight d5, or excuse me, d4. Rook, a6. Bishop, b5. Now, an alternate might be knight to g4, computer suggestion. That's interesting. So after d3, e6, h3, knight takes, queen checks, king f1. I don't think that gets much for black, to be honest with you. It's a little disruptive to white, but that's an interesting line. Knight to d5, knight takes, bishop takes, rook to b8. Now, I've seen a lot of Sicilians. I'm not familiar with this one, to be honest with you. Knight takes, pawn takes, d3. Interesting. Now the bishop can't be trapped anymore. If the pawn does come up, the bishop can just come back to here. And if pawn comes up, you can just push pawn here and escape. So the bishop's okay. e6 is what he does. Bishop goes back to b3. Bishop d6. Now, oddly enough, we're on move 12. I remember going over this game earlier. All the knights are gone. So, interesting. Queen h5. Bishop f4. It's like Carlsen's going for it. Bishop takes, queen takes. Rook f1. What to do? Queen to c5 was interesting. And then f6, queen takes, queen e5, queen takes, pawn takes. That was a computer suggestion. That's interesting as well. After rook to f1, queen checks, king moves to h1. Now, I'm looking at my Fritz 13 computer on off screen. It's basically even, tiny advantage for black. I mean, white is secure here. There's no problems. Black finally castles and rook to f3 just to get the queen out. Queen goes back to h6. Now, oddly enough, the third move is queen takes h6. G takes, busted up black's pawns. But a better move is queen to c5 or e5. And that's what Carlsen does, of course. He always does the better move. Queen to e5, a5, a4. Those of you that were wondering why queen didn't take the pawn, pawn goes there, queen takes, pawn takes, f5. It's just 2 pawns for the piece and white loses. After a4, bishop b6, a takes, rook takes. Now, bishop takes and rook takes is so close in score, it's basically a toss-up. Saric decided to play rook takes instead. Then queen takes d4. Now that bishop won't be trapped anymore. Queen to d2. Rook a to f1. He's trying to develop an attack. Double up on the f-file. This pawn can't come over because the queen's there to guard it. This is all secure in here. Queen to b4. This is where I have trouble in my games, and I'm only an amateur. I'm mid-1500 rated USCF rating, and this is where I have trouble in the late middle game, trying to formulate a plan. I don't even know what the plan would be, except for what Magnus did was a triple up on the file. And that's where I seem to be my shortcoming, so to speak, is that. A couple of choices here for black. f6, queen e7. Saric decides to go f6. It's weakening the pawn structure a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. Rook to f4. Threatening, of course, e5, which threatens the queen. So he goes rook to e5 instead to stop that. And it looks like he wants to move the bishop. He goes rook to b1. So it looks like he's planning on moving this bishop. And this pawn would be guarded with a rook to b1. a4. Bishop a2. Keeping that pressure on. You want to keep that pressure on. Sometimes just the threat of something happening is almost as powerful as doing it. It's always in the back of his mind that bishop is bearing down on his king. Rook to b8. He decides to double up. c3. Chasing the queen off. Queen to b6. Queen to d2. Now that was an interesting move there. I'm looking at the computer off screen. I didn't see anything in the selection. Nothing. That's not a shot against Magnus. I'm just wondering what his plan is. Rook to d2. If he had taken the pawn on traded queens on b6, rook takes, rook f5. And you can see, of course, you can't take because of the pin. Rook takes, e takes, king f7. Small advantage for black. But after queen to d2, rook to b5. Now he's threatening the b2 pawn. Rook to f2. He's backing up a little bit, which is unlike Magnus. Queen to c7, h3. Give a little loop for your king. h6. Queen to e3. What to do, what to do. Saric decides to put some pressure on the king side with rook to g5. And Magnus is slowly pushing his center pawns up. King to h8, and finally getting where he can move that e pawn. He couldn't before because of this pin on there that was been plaguing him the whole time. Rook to e1 for Magnus. Saric goes bishop b5. Now, that's a pretty good move there. I like that. It controls a lot of key squares right here. e5. White's just trying to pick up some space. Should he take or not take? What to do, what to do? f5. Now that closes it up quite a bit. And looking at the computer off screen, it's a small, tiny advantage for white. d5. Pawn takes, bishop c4. Now at this point I want to say, We're on move 37. Magnus is looking at the other games because he's in first place in this tournament. And he sees where the other games are heading. And a draw at this point will win the tournament for him. And he knows that. And not that he's laying back, but he's not going to push the envelope. He goes rook to d1, rook e8, bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, queen to b5. Now black sacrificed the pawn, but it's going to be hard pressed to keep that pawn on e5, I think. e6, queen, queen f3, queen takes, rook to d5. Now he's ganging up on the other pawn. Not going to do much good though. Queen checks, rook to f1, queen e2, rook takes, rook takes. If you're wondering about queen takes b2, rook takes, rook to g8, and it's over. And you can see why. It's going to be mate soon. Well, I should take that back. If pawn takes, queen here checks, wins the rook. And he has to play rook to a5. He's down a rook, so that would be over. So that free pawn isn't so free. Because what is going on is this queen is guarding the square. So queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. You see this coming. Rook to a5, rook to c2, rook takes. And they're down to 2 pawns on each side and rooks. Typical drawing situation. So that ends the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess. Congratulations to Magnus Carlsen, who got first place. He had a rough start, first couple 3 rounds, but he ended up winning 6 in a row. And you're going to see a small piece with Magnus in an interview at the end of this video. So I hope you all enjoyed all the action from Tata Steel 2015. There was some great games, and I thank you very much for all the views I've received on this tournament and all the extra subscribers I picked up. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And as I always say, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye. Well, folks, here are the final standings in the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess. The Masters section, Magnus Carlsen, world champion with 9 points. Strong second, Maxime Vacher-Lagrave, Geary, and So, and Ding with 8.5. That's a tight bunch up right there. Vasily Ivanchuk with 7.5. Started out really strong, kind of petered out. He's a brilliant guy. Caruana, Italian-American with 7. Rajabov with 6. Bosek with 5.5, as well as Aronian. Poor Aronian. I understand he's just barely in the top 10 now by 2 rating points. Tough. He's had a tough 6-8 months. Oh well. Levin will come back. He's a great player. Hui Yifan, current women's world champion with 5. Saric with 4.5. Van Wheely with 4. And poor Bedar Jababa from Georgia with 3.